Hello and welcome to Unsourced Wall. My name is Elvis, and as always, I am your host. Okay, so let's get on right into it. There's a huge bunch of announcements to get through. The biggest one of all is that the Snyder cut of Justice League is finally going to be released. Now, you know me, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while now, ever since these rumblings started, you know that my position on the Snyder cut as it is that whatever work print version exists, it is thoroughly unfinished. And, well, it seems to me that that was at least right, because WB is giving Zack Snyder $20 to $30 million estimated of a budget to complete post-production on his own director's cut. Now, there are some things that aren't finished, there are some scenes that weren't shot, but they are trying to compile a coherent, definitive director's cut for him with some new effects and probably for old cast members to come back in and re-record some lines to smooth things over. So it's probably going to be as complete as it can be. Obviously, it's not the most ideal situation. You would have wanted to have this done at the time. You would want to have all of the footage you need. It's just insane to think that this is finally happening, that after all the outcry over like the last 2.5 years, we're finally getting this film, this version of this movie that people have been wanting for such a long time. And I know there's a lot of controversy about how they went about it, but honestly, it's not something that is that out of the ordinary. I keep seeing targeted harassment campaign and abusive bullying, that kind of thing. But if anything, it's just been the same kind of fandom movement that you see all over the place. You see it with Star Wars, you see it with Star Trek, you see it with any kind of big franchise where there are different cuts, different versions, and different factions that want to see like what they feel is the integral vision of the movie, of their show, of their product. Obviously, the Snyder Cut hashtag and movement has been co-opted by a few nefarious hucksters and grifters. I remember the original petition from change.org got like hacked or reattributed to some sort of like ultra right-wing white supremacist person who would use the mailing list to pretty much send out these really vile newsletters about like white supremacy and stuff, and that was a huge stain on that. And then you obviously have Comicsgate trying to co-opt and trying to kind of glom on to the movement because it's the whole respect the fan thing, and obviously the release of Snyder Cut has been a big fan movement, so they tried to, you know, kind of say, hey, Comicsgate and Zack Snyder Cut fans were the same coalition, and I think that's also been a pretty big stain on that as well. But honestly, from what I've seen and from mutuals that I have that are a part of this movement, it's been just a lot of interesting back and forth and a lot of passion and a lot of enthusiasm. And honestly, like I said before, it's not something out of the ordinary. So I feel like that's been kind of exaggerated a bit too much. And you're also seeing a lot of people come out of the woodwork saying the most ridiculous things, like how the original theatrical cut of Justice League was way better than Man of Steel or Batman vs Superman, and that's why it's pointless to give him the reins to make a worse movie than the theatrical cut. And I had to say, if you think the theatrical cut was better than either of the previous two movies, then you are certifiably insane, because no one in their right rational mind could think that, other than just to be contrarian for the sake of it. So I'm disregarding that entirely. And then you have people saying that it's gonna be bad anyway, so why release it? And to that I have to say, doesn't matter. The entire point was just to get it out there, to get it as a curiosity, to see it, just to have that experience. So, you know, that's for the people who want to see it, who want that experience, and no one's forcing you to see it. It's on a subscription streaming service, you know, behind a paywall that you have to pay to get into. So unless you pay for it, you don't have to see it. And you're not exactly paying for it, you're paying for the service, which is going to have hundreds of thousands of different other things to watch. So you have literally no recourse to watch this movie if you don't want to, if you think it's going to be bad. And so you're just winding into the ether, and I think that's pretty pathetic. I honestly do. I think that's just a lot of aggression and negativity for no reason. And for whatever you might say about people who really wanted this cut, who are part of the movement, they're not as undignified as the people going out against it in these wild and really inane kind of ways. So yeah, I'm excited for it. I'm excited for it as a novelty, as a gimmick, as a curiosity. I want to see what he can do. I don't think it's going to be great. I don't think it's going to be terrible either. I don't have much hopes for it in terms of what it can bring to me as a Fourfold fan, but I am curious about what it can bring to the table. One thing that stuck out to me a lot is the idea that Zack Snyder has been going on for a long time about how his work print version was like 4 hours or even more, and now that this is going to be a definitive, actually made cut, he's going to have to deliver on that 4 hours. Even if it wasn't like an optimal version of the movie, he's going to have to fill that running time. That's what people want to see. So we might end up with a really bloated movie that could be trimmed down, that could be cut down, but isn't, because we've built it up. The movement has built it up into this huge mythological epic, this grand scale epic. I'm cautious. I really am cautious. I'm not going to say it's going to be terrible or doomed or an epic mess, but it's exciting in both frightening and honestly kind of thrilling ways just to have it in the ether. So I can't wait to see what happens. It's going to be released in 2021 and fingers crossed for it. And the only other really big news topic this week was that Ruby Rose has left Batwoman on the CW and is going to be recast for season 2. There's a bunch of rumors and scandals and theories going around about this, development. The foremost of which is that Ruby Rose was a hassle on set, was a huge diva, and she left and was kind of forced out of production because no one could stand her. And we get some verification, or at least some support for this, in a lot of CW execs and showrunners and writers kind of celebrating the news, obviously not quoting or tweeting or replying to any of the actual news articles that sprung up, but around the same time they started all cheering. And that's a shame, because I like my own theory about it, which is that she had the contract for season 1 and then she realized after reading scripts for an entire season of CW tripe and shit, she realized that getting out while the getting was good was probably better for her career. Because honestly, I don't see how anyone could ever respect themselves as an actor and still be on a CW show like that. It's an incredible development. It's insane, but fingers crossed that whoever still likes the show won't have their experience dampened by this recasting. And lastly, in comic news, we have finally Josh Williamson is leaving The Flash ongoing after 3-4 years right now of probably the most mediocre, fumbling, and uninspired Flash ongoing writing I've read in a long time. And I read Venditti Flash. I can't wait. I'm really excited. Hopefully we get someone else on there, someone who can write Barry or the Flash family in a great way. That's actually exciting. That's not just overwritten and plotting and just fizzled out because it can't stand the load of everything else that's going on in the plot, which has happened time and time again. It happened with the Reverse Flash reintroduction, it happened with Captain Cold and the Rogues Reloaded, it happened with all the other stuff he's been doing, especially the 7 different forces in the Speed Force. It's insanity, it's ridiculous, and it's honestly been just borderline unreadable. It's the kind of bland and boring that isn't even exciting to read if it was completely tripe. Kudos to Josh Williamson for clinging on to the gig as long as he has, but I will not miss him. And lastly, before we move on, we finally have an announcement date for the second season of The Umbrella Academy, and that is July 31st. It's at the end of July. I can't wait for that. First season was so good. I rewatched it recently, and it holds up, so fingers crossed for that. And I can't wait to just jump back into that world, these characters again. And with that, let's move on to what I read this week. First off, we have more of DC's Digital Wave with Superman, Man of Tomorrow, number 5 from Robert Venditti. And this is where we start to get the culmination, or at least the start to the payoff of the long-running thread throughout these digital Superman issues. And it's not that exciting. It's not that great. It's not something that fills me with awe or wow. It's still just so bland. It's still just so first draft. It gets a little bit interesting at the end, but the rest of it is not even by the numbers. It feels like it's padding out time when we're already starting to pull the trigger on things. I don't know how you can do that. I don't know how you can act like you're putting out filler right at the middle of a climactic kind of issue, but that's what Venditti is doing. And it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to read. It feels like you're wasting time, even though a lot of development is happening. And what's going on here is that it's a typical Lex Luthor turn people against Superman plot, which has been done and done again over and over. But it's a good plot. It's got solid bones. It's a good stock Superman plot. But what happens is that it comes to a head in such a ridiculous way. It comes out of nowhere and it just kicks off the plot. And then you have Lex Luthor having this privatization of Metropolis security for the entire city. And it does a lot of things off screen, and it's like a montage, but it's not even an interesting montage. But the things that actually make it interesting happen in the last 2 pages, where you're seeing how it's being used and abused by LexCorp in order to put Superman into this no-win situation, which is great. But you could have made the entire issue about that. You could have had that at the forefront. You didn't even need Titano. You could have just had Lex Luthor come out with this privatization contract that the city gave him, and then have everything kind of build off from that. But you're not. And instead, you feel like you're just wading through a lot of uneventful beats to get to the actual core nugget, the whole thematic force of the issue. The only good thing about the issue is the last 2 pages, because it draws you in with a really intense moment that feels kind of a no-win situation. It feels very, very dire. You feel dread in it. That's a great emotion. It shows that Venditti can write, but I think that the constraints of being a very accessible digital, or in this case Walmart line of stories and little snippets and vignettes, has been wearing down on him. So that's a shame. Overall, 2 thumbs middle. It's mediocre, it's average, it's not that great, and hopefully the next issue, which promises to bring forward more of the payoff here, can actually capitalize on that, because otherwise it's a very uninspired set of shorts. And if this is what's been building up to, then it's not going to read well at all together, and I don't see why anyone would want to. After that, we have Swamp Thing New Roots number 4 by Mark Russell, and this was an interesting issue. It took me a while to get into it, and by the end of it, I could see what they were going for, but for most of it, it kind of loses me because it detaches so much from what was making the initial couple issues good, which was that you were getting into the atmosphere, you were getting into Swampy's head, you were getting into his personality, his dynamics, his emotions, his characterization, and you were really feeling for him, which is the core story engine for Swamp Thing. You care about Alec, you care about Swampy, you care about what he means to himself and what he means to others and what he means to the world. It drives you through those stories and it makes you believe in those stories. This one, it kind of feels like it strips it all back, and so I was left pretty unsettled. I was left pretty off kilter throughout most of it because it felt so devoid of all of that. And by the end of the issue, I realized, as it shows, it turns out it's all simulation. It's all like pretty much a hypothetical situation that Sunderland Industries is running through in order to make sure that their plans for Swamp Thing and his capture are going to work. I guess that makes sense, but it is kind of disorienting to just be plopped into that situation off the bat without any kind of thing to grasp onto. Uneasy sensibility there, and I don't think it works to its benefit. When you get to the payoff, when you get to like the punchline there, it all makes sense, and I think it works as a great short, but as part of the entire run of the digital issues here, I can see it being a little bit of an odd man out. It's a good issue, but overall, it's still the strongest digital first series that DC is putting out. Overall, 2 thumbs up. And lastly, we have finally what I watched this week, which is the first episode of Stargirl called Pilot. Let's just get right into this. It's not bad, but it's also not that good either. It's definitely a show with 2 minds to it. It has the sensibility of being very much a JSA core story about Courtney, about the JSA, about Pat, and about Legacy, and it's trying to be a very exciting, thrilling, heartening superhero origin and superhero story. And on the other hand, you have a bunch of CW teen drama tripe cliches that are just forced right in, and they feel out of place, and it feels so awkward and unnatural to have in there. What you have is an opening scene that shows some battle of the JSA. You don't really notice stakes. It feels very out of left field. It doesn't feel like you're building up to anything. It doesn't feel climactic. It doesn't feel exciting. It's not even exciting in a JSA fanboy kind of way, because all the luminary iconic JSA characters are already dead by the time you get up there, and you don't even have any grasp on what's happening or why. And then we're just thrust into Courtney's origin, and it's fine. It's good enough. You get a great sense of who she is as a character, who she is as a person, and her own anxieties, insecurities, and doubts, and how that plays off with Pat, who's coming into her life. And Pat by Luke Wilson is the strongest part of this episode, because Luke Wilson embodies this kind of good-natured, well-meaning, and kind of folksy kind of person. This figure in Courtney's life that is going to be, I guess, a bit of a foil, and it's great. He's great as a straight man to Courtney's youthful and independent streak of character, of her dynamic with him. It's pretty fun, and it has the most weight to it. But then you have pretty much this entire really, really insipid idea that like, oh wait, no, now Brainwave is the leader of the town council of commerce, and his son Brainwave Jr. is a douchey, rapey, sexual harassment jock, and his girlfriend is part of the Mean Girls, the Plastics ripoff, and the Outcasts are all loners and on the fringe, and we know from promotional materials that they're going to become the JSA legacy characters as well. Like, one of them is going to be the new Dr. Midnight, and it's not that exciting. It's not that great. It feels very lame. It feels very intrusive, and I really hope and this is my sincere hope in watching the pilot, that we don't spend that much time in the high school, because everything else is so much stronger. And you having things like, oh wait, no, Sportsmaster is the local gym nut who's also kind of a jock bully too, but for the adults. And it's too easy, it's too simple, it's too forced. It feels just like a lot of, well, like I said, trite, lazy standards. It feels like it's brute forcing the idea of legacy. It feels like it's trying to have its cake and eat it too, with Stargirl being a teen character, but also trying to have it so that she harkens back to a golden age, a more kind of quaint, more heroic, innocent age. And it's not going to work when you have things like the golden age of superheroics being the early 2000s, because that's kind of nonsensical. It doesn't flow. You don't really believe it. And I guess it's trying to do this whole thing where it's trying to do the contrast with like small town suburbia, like small town America being a front for the Injustice Society. Like that's where they've put their fingers in. Like they're controlling the society there, the community there, and under the veneer of like white picket fences and malt shops in Main Street, which is a good idea, but it loses value when you're also doing really, really lame high school tropes. And another thing about it is that it's also weirdly self-aggrandizing. Like I said, it wants to have like this legacy feeling, but you don't really know the JSA, you don't really care about the JSA, but you still get like a 5-minute long sequence with like the orchestra score like blaring like that full volume when Courtney starts handling the cosmic staff, and it just insists that it's important, like this is something powerful. But we don't know Courtney that well, we don't know Starman that well, we don't know what the entire point of the cosmic staff is or what it does or who Starman was. He had like 5 lines in the beginning and 3 of them were jokes, so it just feels very out of place. It feels, again, blunt, forced, and uninteresting, because it's hard to be interested in something that is trying so hard to hit you on the head with, see, this is something grand and epic, but why? Impress on it to me. That scene with Courtney and the cosmic staff when she first gets it should have been like a normal moment. It's like in Star Wars, where Luke gets Anakin's lightsaber, right? He just gets it and he starts playing around with it. Simple scene, because one, you don't know Anakin Skywalker, you don't know the whole backstory. To Luke, you're experiencing it through Luke's eyes, and through Luke's eyes, he just gets a sword and he's experienced it on his own. What you would do after that is, if you wanted to have a great moment, the cosmic staff, you want to have a grand, epic, heartening moment later on, you could do that when Courtney as Stargirl finally realizes the depth and impact of what it means, the responsibility of what it means to be the JSA legacy. You could then have her like pick up the cosmic staff renewed with this new sense of purpose and this knowledge of that. And then you have the big kind of overwhelming score. Like, now she is Stargirl, now she is the JSA, now she is a superhero of her own right. The show itself isn't that bad. Courtney's actress is decent, tone is decent, but it's not something that I feel gets off on the best foot. So fingers crossed that it's going to improve as time goes along, and that it doesn't double down on the stuff that was pretty off kilter in this pilot, because I want to show about the JSA to be actually good, to really feel like it knows what the JSA is about and what makes that entire part of the DCU work, and not just a show that uses JSA trappings to tell high school level stories about bullying and mean girls and jocks and all that kind of ridiculous shit, cheap melodrama like a regular CW show. And that's what worries me a lot. I mean, there's so many ways you can go about that, and it doesn't feel like it's going to go anywhere good. I mean, so overall, 2 thumbs middle. There you go. Anyway, that's it for this week. As always, I just want to say thank you to everyone out there who sent me a question, comment, or topic. It means so much to me. I didn't ask for any this week because I'm still getting my bearings here. But if you have sent in a question, comment, or topic, it means so much to me. I'm so humbled by that, so thank you so much. And that if you have your own question, comment, or topic you want to send into the show, you can always find me on Twitter at THE_SNICKMAN. And please check out the covers for our show at DOTEMCE. They're amazing. Give them support. They really deserve it. Have a great Memorial Day. And probably going to say that again next week as well. And hope you have a great one in general. See you again next time.